Hello, and welcome to this week's Eco Show. I'm Henry, and this is Eco Show, which is about ecology, eco happenings, and that can range from research to popular news and any other little random tidbits. So we go through the animal of the week, and then we talk about some research that's come out in the past week from a journal, and then we wrap up with some good news. So let's hop into the animal of the week. This week it is the baboon. I don't remember why I wanted to do the baboon in particular, but I thought it was cool. I don't know where my mouse is gone. Where is my mouse gone? Okay, so the baboon. Our baboons are primates, so they're monkey mode, and there's 6 species of baboons, and the collective noun for baboons, so for a group of baboons, are called a troop, and that the number of individuals in a troop can range from 5 to 250 animals. Pretty big range there, and species can vary in size from 50 centimeters, which is about 20 inches small, to 120 centimeters, which is 47 inches long. I just get sniffly. All of a sudden, I was totally fine this morning, and then out of nowhere, I got sniffly. Okay, so that is the number, that's the size. They have long muzzles and sharp teeth. And I'll put up an image here of a baboon. And they have, in this one, they have hairless pads of skin called ischial callocytes that provide sitting comfort. So that sort of multicolored or funky looking bum is a hard little pad that's used for sitting comfortably. I wonder if humans will develop that, because we're sitting a lot. They have sexual dimorphism, which just means that there's a difference between the sort of size and characteristics between the sexes, sort of like peacocks. How the male peacocks have all the big feathers and everything, and the females do not. Baboons do not have feathers, though. They're just saying males tend to be bigger. They are diurnal, so dang, how am I blanking out? It's early in the morning. My keypad isn't working. Oh well. Diurnal, I'm almost 100%. I should know what diurnal means, but it's the morning, and I believe it means uh is it both though, or is it the daytime? Dang it. Um let's have a look see real fast. I can't. I'm looking up diurnal right now. I'm searching it in the thing. And happening during the day. Okay, it is daytime. What's both then? Well, anyways, so they are doing things during the daytime. Glad I checked that out. So diurnal, which makes sense with the D for daytime, but I don't think it necessarily. I don't think the D means it's not D for daytime, but that's going to be in my mind now. And they sleep in trees or high on cliffs and or rocks, because they have got a lot of predators, including humans, that they need to be wary of. They're omnivorous, so they'll eat plants and fruit and other animals. But from what I was reading, it didn't seem like they're particularly big hunters. It seemed like a lot of the sort of fierce looking things and sort of sharp teeth and whatnot looked like seemed almost more like it was for fighting related things. Okay, they're omnivorous. Their main predators are Nile crocodiles, leopards, lions, and hyenas, which is a pretty big crew of predators to be wary of. Nile crocodiles, especially. I guess when they're hanging around watering holes or things like that is when they're sort of prime targets for crocodiles, but that's a rough time. Baboons look all tough, but if you've got all of those different guys going after you, that's not a great time. These troops that they live in tend to be hierarchical, which just means that there's a dominant structure in place, and they tend to have harem formation. So that means that one or a couple males are sort of in a relationship with a lot of females at one time, and they'll sort of guard those females in the harem. They can live up to 45 years in captivity or 20 to 30 years in the wild. And young males leave before reaching sexual maturity, so they don't have to deal with the drama of the competition of having to fight in that hierarchy, I guess. The oldest fossil record for these is 2 million years old. So they've been around. And infants are sometimes used as shields or hostages. So if a troop was invading another troop or trying to get resources or place or females or something like that, they will sometimes use infants as shields or hostages. So they get into some pretty intense warfare, it seems like. And in terms of their relationship to ecology, they disperse seeds because apparently they're fairly sloppy eaters, and so they'll eat seeds and disperse them around throughout the environment. And what else? They've also are able to survive in harsh environments. There is what was the show? Planet Earth. There was a Planet Earth episode that showed, I believe it was a group of baboons that lived on top of rock. I'll put a photo of it here. Or on top of a plateau, so they can survive in really inhospitable environments and find lots of different things to eat. I wonder if it's the microphone that I'm getting all sniffly with. Anyways, so yeah, they can occupy these tricky places, and that can include around human settlement. They are fairly not in danger of going extinct and things like that, but they are losing lots of habitat loss, so habitat loss is pushing them towards human settlement, which can lead to more instances where they are hunted and killed and things like that. So they are doing all right for now. How could you not be doing all right with a hair pad, a bum pad like that? Hairless pad. It's not hairy. That sounds great. Just sit wherever you want. Sit on down, relax on your ischial calcite for sitting comfort. Okay, that's our animal of the week. And we're moving on now to research related stuff. The research journal that we're looking at this week is called Landscape Ecology, which is kind of the area of ecology that I'm involved in. So this was good for me this week because it was like doing some reading that I needed to do. And a bit of it is kind of related to stuff that I've done and or am doing. So this first article is about ocelots, which are a type of cat thing. Oh, again, I'm looking this up because I can and I will. Ocelot. Yep, so I'll put up a photo here. It looks like a little cheetah or like a little leopard. It's got really beautiful coloring going on. And this article was looking at habitat connectivity, and connectivity is a big issue for different species of wildlife because they need to be able to move around to interact with other populations and spread genes through via mating. And like we saw with baboons, most animals play a role in ecology beyond just existing on their own. They may eat lower thing, other animals, they may be eaten by other animals. So the ability for them to move from place to place is important for functioning ecosystems. Which is why borders are so interesting, isn't it? Okay, that's not ecology related though. So let's see. We've got issues particularly around roads because roads really break up the landscape and some animals just won't cross roads at all, but they're everywhere all over the world now. So it's important to understand the relationship of different animals and different ecosystems to roads. And they were looking at how ocelots respond to roads, and they were basically seeing if roads have a significant impact. And they looked at the movement records of ocelots in relationship to roads and found that they were isolated by these roads, and they recommended developing some sort of crossing structure for them to be able to move around. And these can be tricky because one, they're expensive and it takes community buy-in to be able to do that. So you may want to save the ocelot, but the community might not be interested in that. And it is really expensive because you're basically building a bridge. So it can be a very tricky thing to do, and you don't necessarily know how the outcomes of it are going to be. And you also don't want to create habitat around a road that attracts things. But that's what they were calling for. They were recommending wildlife structures for them to cross. There's something else in this article that I was interested by, but I don't know if I wrote it down. Highly connected areas of conservation. Yep. So that's that on that one. Connectivity is a really interesting issue, especially though as climate change is getting more intense and it's making habitats for some animals not habitable anymore. So a good example of that is how polar bears that usually are living on sea ice are needing to move onto land or spend longer periods of time on land as there's less and less sea ice. So this is a ongoing issue that is confronting animals and the world. So understanding where things like to move is an ongoing and important area of study. Because, and like we saw with the baboons, some of these animals may be moving into human settlements, which may lead to situations of conflict going on between them. We don't want that. We don't want a baboon war. Because I feel like, we would win a baboon war, but it would not be nice. Who knows? We might lose a baboon war. They might be very smart. I would not, and I wouldn't want to fight against baboons either. That would be hard. Getting people to fight against the baboons to begin with, and then of those people, it's not going to be very motivated people. Nobody's going to be inspired to fight baboons. And those uninspired people fighting the baboons, I don't know if they're going to stand a chance. So let's nip this baboon war in the bud and make sure we are designing and understanding where to live and be into the future that is beneficial for as many organisms, beings as possible. Our next article is, so these are all sort of spatial things because landscape ecology is looking at the landscape scale of ecology. So the things that happen at the landscape scale in ecology tend to be about habitat and then the space in between habitat. So there's a lot of questions about the arrangement of habitat and how that impacts species. You can imagine it like if you have a soccer field worth of habitat for a species, is that going to be the same value as the same amount of area of habitat as a soccer field? But if you chopped it up into 4 pieces and then spread it out by a mile, you still have the same area of habitat, but now you have a lot of space in between that habitat, which for some species may be good, and for some species it may be bad. But that arrangement and distance between habitat on its own is an important ecological mechanism. So that's sort of what landscape ecology generally is sort of looking at, is form and function and composition and then the quality of that habitat. But also is kind of just like big stuff. So this one is more of and that the title of that article was Predators Do Not, I totally skipped one. Did I? Landscape Connectivity for Endangered Carnivore Habitat Conservation and Road Mitigation for Ocelots in the U.S. by Amanda Veals et al. And this next article is also looking at predators, but predators of insects. So there has been a promoted understanding of increased crop diversity as being beneficial for maintaining pest insects. So the idea here is that if you plant diverse crops around each other, then you will create more habitat for different predators of pest insect species. That sort of has been a going idea that's been popular in agroecology, and this research was exploring that. But I will note that what they were calling diverse was, I think, just two species. It was cotton and some other thing. So I don't know if that super classifies as diverse, but they were planting two crop species, and they were calling that diverse. I don't know if you can call that diverse, but anyways, so we're looking at crop diversity as biocontrol, and they were looking at aphids. So aphids are put a little photo of aphids. They eat crops, and they are a pest. So they were looking at how this having areas with diversity in crops planted impacts those aphid populations. And they found that diversity had no impact on aphid populations. And they also found that if you have semi-natural habitats, so meadows or things like that around the food source, that this actually increased the number of aphids. So there's the idea that diversity of crops will lead to more predator species being around, and so they can eat more of the pest species. There's also the idea that if you have some sort of natural habitat around your crops, that will also allow for other predator species to come in and eat your pest species. And predators in this case are things like ladybugs, and they named a few other ones. Ladybugs or ladybirds, depending on where you're from. But what they did find was that there was one of the predators, which is called the lacewing, did increase as there was more crop edge. So if there was more crop edges, so if there was more space in between the crops or things like that, then you had more predators present. So it's not a one size fit all with the crops that you're planting. So when you're planting your crops and tending to your thing, before you invest in, having a whole bunch of ponds and meadows around your cotton or your whatever else, it's important to understand the pest and also the predators that you're trying to get to come in there. So this is just a sort of an example that diversity is not always going to bring in predators that you're desiring. But again, diversity that they were talking about was only two crop species. So there you have that. Okay, and that was titled Predators Do Not Benefit from Crop Diversity, but Respond to Configurational Heterogeneity in Wheat and Cotton Fields. Wheat. It was in the title. But I'm not reading the title because it gives away the whole thing. And that was by Thomine et al. I believe that research was in China. But don't quote me on that. And I'll put links in the bottom of this I put the title as well as the author name. And I may even put depending on the word limit, I may even put just my whole notes in the description of these shows. But I will include the link to where I got the article as well as the name of the article and the title of the writer, the author, because sometimes they have figures there And if you have access to these different sites, then you can look at the article directly. But it's wild to me that for one of these articles, it'll be, if you wanted to actually buy it, if you didn't have access through either work or university, it's $40. That's wild. And you have to, and when you're submitting your articles to journals, most often usually have to pay for them to read it and for it to get published. So, but more journals are moving towards being open access. Not yet, though. Our next issue is still looking at spatial patterns. So, thinking landscape. But now we're looking at spatial patterns and I can read that. I'll read the title of this one. The relationship between spatial patterns of urban land uses and air pollutants in the Tehran metropolis, Iran. And this is by Soheil Gheshlaghpoor. And I apologize if Soheil is listening and I mispronounced that. I also apologize to anybody else if that is wrong. Okay. So this is like many of the issues that we talked about before. Urban expansion leads to land use change and landscape pattern change. So they were looking at, as it said in the title, is there a relationship between pollutants and different land use associations? And they found that yes, there was. So that in Tehran there was increased pollution associated with more built up areas, and there was more ozone associated with open areas, sort of more natural areas. So I'm not exactly sure what. Oh, I guess I don't know. Well, ozone is O3, and plants produce oxygen. But I wonder if plants produce ozone. Interesting question. I'm not going to look it up now. But there was. So they're finding that relationship between urban centers and pollution going on. So there's that, and I already read the title. So we're moving and grooving on to the next one. We've got 2 more articles, and then we've got headlines. So I'll move and groove through those. And this next article is looking at the interactions between sound and biodiversity, and in particular, soundscapes. And again, I'm going to read the title for this one: Spatial Dynamics of Soundscapes and Biodiversity in a Semi-Arid Landscape. And that's by Marina D. Scarpelli. So, semi-arid landscapes are heterogeneous. They may have hills and valleys and things, and they can be sort of desertous, but it's not totally desert. And monitoring in these areas can be tricky. And so what they're looking at is, can you use acoustics or sound recorders to monitor biodiversity? So is there a relationship of this soundscape to biodiversity? And did environmental factors relate to sound for the most part? This was collected in a semi-arid area in Queensland. Mostly birds and insects were detected, and they found that scale was important. So when they did this over their area, they found there was an association between birds and insects with vegetation in particular. And so when you're looking at this, it might then be more important to, depending on what you're looking at the sound relationship of different parts of the tree canopy rather than what the layout was sort of like was over a larger area, but there was a relationship there. And I thought this was interesting, particularly because of the idea of a sound landscape, which is not something that I've thought about very much, and especially on land. It's something that seems more, you might think about it more in marine settings where animals in the ocean are relying on sound and things like that. But it is interesting to think about our sound landscape, and particularly in cities, the impact that sounds have on people. So there's a relationship between soundscapes and biodiversity in this arid, semi-arid landscape, but they're saying that where you lay out your sound recorders is an important thing to do. Okay, and our last research article for today is about the relationship between tortoises and agriculture. Torti and agriculture. And the title for this one was Navigating Agricultural Landscapes, Responses of Critically Endangered Giant Tortoises to Farmland Vegetation and Infrastructure. This was by Can Pike et al., and it was based in the Galapagos Islands, which have famously big tortoises. Infrastructure impacts animal movement. So we've talked about this already today. Roads impact where things are going to go or not go. And the Galapagos, tortoises interact with lots of farms, and part of the motivation for this was understanding where tortoises like to hang out, where they walk through quickly, where they spend more time around, so that you have a better idea of what places may be a risk for tortoises. So they watched 27 tortoises and observed their movements. They found that they preferred pasture over native vegetation. They had little preference between native vegetation, crops, or invasive vegetation. They traveled slower in pasture and faster in invasive vegetation. They had a high likelihood to be by ponds. And they said fences were porous to tortoises, so these tortoises were getting through fences. I don't think they were climbing over, though. They use areas near roads with low traffic. And so overall, they were finding that these tortoises like to move around ponds and pasture, and roads and fences don't stop them from moving. So move aside ocelots. These tortoises, they don't need a habitat bridge. They're going to go through the road. And these tortoises get pretty big. These would probably not be a trivial thing to avoid on the road. And the meaning of this, or the importance of this, is better understanding where to design for tortoises, how to interact better with them. But I like the idea of tortoises strolling and enjoying a pasture, which makes sense. If I'm a reptile, I'm going to be hanging out in the sun, and a pasture is going to be an appealing sun-drenched environment. I'm not sure what they eat, but maybe pasture is got some good food for them. Oh no. Okay, never mind. My screen went off. But that was that about giant endangered tortoises and the relationship to farmland vegetation. So if you're thinking of getting a giant endangered tortoise, be sure that you have pasture and ponds, but probably not too deep of a pond. I don't know. They're by the ocean, so they shouldn't be afraid of too deep of a pond, but make sure it doesn't get too deep too quickly for these guys. Give them a break. They've been around for a long time. Okay, on to headlines. We've got 3 headlines today, and then we're wrapped. Oh, I got 1 headline, and then I got good news. So the headline from today was that landscape level honeybee hive density instead of field level hive density enhances honeybee visitation in blueberry. That was by Maxime Ertz et al. So what they're saying is very straightforward, that instead of in an individual field, how many hives do you have there? It's more important to have density over the entire landscape. So instead of necessarily having it maybe clumped in one area, having it over the landscape is important for blueberry. So we've got lots of good tips for farmers this week. This week has been a really good episode if you're a blueberry farmer, if you're a wheat or cotton farmer, or if you're a farmer that needs to be aware of the movements of Galapagos turtles. This has been your week. So make sure the whole landscape is dense with bees, which makes sense. So distribute these hives around. But this is in a blueberry example, so important to read the article before you go and start distributing your beehives all across the landscape. Okay, on to good news. There was a frog discovered called the Ukaguru spiny-throated reed frog. Scientific name Hyperoleus ukagurunensis. And it doesn't croak, chirp, sing, or ribbit. It may use spine like braille to sort of figure out who's hot and who's not, but they don't really know. And they live in these areas called sky islands, which are these remnant areas of forest that have had the land essentially drop away from them. So they're these really little areas of forest. They're high and surrounded by savanna, and they have really rare species living on top. So that was good news. Number 1, the Ukaguru spiny-throated reed frog. So it's very quiet, but it is still doing its thing in the world. And the other good article for this week was about stork conservation. And both these articles were from goodnewsnetwork.org. And this article was saying that Dr. Purnima Devi Barman helped to preserve storks in India. And she did this by changing the sort of narrative around storks, because there are sort of not such positive connotations with storks because they're big, they're stinky, and they're ugly. So it kind of follows that people would be like, hey, maybe these storks aren't so good. But she went through the community and helped to make them more popular by making it sort of more of a positive thing. If you had this sort of tree and thing like that in your backyard, that was beneficial for them. And they're an important part of the ecosystem because they eat dead stuff. So they kind of are help dispose of things. So spreading education and changing the idea around them, and if you have these trees and things that are beneficial for them, was really how she went about doing this. And the stork that she was helping with is called the greater adjutant, or and the scientific name is Leptoptilos dubius, and the local name there in Assamese is Hargila, which means bone swallower, which is so cool. Coolest name ever. So she's helped with that. And the title of that one was An Army of 10,000 Women Saved India's Rare Stork while giving each other a new identity. So, really positive story about the impact of community conservation. And she had a great quote in this article that said, conservation is about uniting people and building ownership. I thought that really captured the feeling of what successful conservation does and how simple it is at its core to get these changes going on. So, uniting people and building ownership. So we can think about this week, how do we unite with other people and how do we build ownership? It's a good thought to take into the week. Oh my gosh. Oh, I've been able to hear myself the whole time, which is why I have these on. But I just freaked out thinking that maybe I didn't have the mic turned on. Hopefully it was. And hopefully we'll catch you next time. Have a great week. See you around. Bye.